UFC 303 is this weekend, guys, and yes, even though we are not seeing Conor McGregor versus Michael Chandler, we still have a massive pay-per-view because Alex Pereira did step in against Jiri Prochazka to fill in for that main event, and that is going down this weekend. And this is a good main event for multiple reasons, right? Obviously, Alex Pereira is a massive star. Jiri is also a very popular fighter, and they both have very exciting fighting styles. But not only that, this is a rematch where Alex Pereira did win back in November at MSG, right? He won in the second round, and Jiri came back at UFC 300, came back with the win. Alex won, so now they're having this rematch. And like I said, it's not only a hype fight because of that, but it's also a razor close matchup. I think this is a 50-50 matchup, and I honestly have no idea who's going to win, but I'm going to do my best to guess. And later on, I'm also going to talk about Brian Ortega versus Diego Lopes, as well as MVP versus Ian Garry. But guys, before we get into it, I want to remind you guys to subscribe button, like, comment, and share. We're almost at 13K, guys. You guys have been killing it with the support, so please help out the channel. And I'm excited for all three of these fights. I'm going to break it down after watching some film, break down my analysis and what I think these guys' strengths are, their weaknesses are, and what the game plan should be. And let's start with MVP versus Ian Garry, right? Because that is going to be the first fight of the night to open up the pay-per-view, guys. MVP is coming off of his UFC debut against Kevin Holland, while Ian Garry is coming off of that fight against Jeff Neal. That was pretty boring, wasn't anything exciting. Ian Garry has been lacking recently in his performances, and now he's fighting backwards to fight MVP. I think this was because he wanted to fight on a fight with Conor McGregor. Obviously, Conor is no longer on the card, but he's still fighting Michael Venom Page. And MVP overall just has a very weird striking style, right? It's a style that not a lot of people could get used to. So I think this is going to be tough for Ian Garry because Ian Garry is only 13 fights into his career, or 14 fights, I don't exactly remember, but still not a lot of fights. He hasn't lost and learned that adversity yet, so I do think Ian Garry is very beatable, right? I do think that at some point he is going to lose. I don't know when it is, but I doubt he's going to retire undefeated. He's very good, don't get me wrong, but I still think he has some lessons to learn. Well, how does Ian Garry win this fight, guys? Well, I think Ian Garry has to enter the clinch with Michael Venom Page. I think mix it up, make it a mixed martial arts fight, because as we know, MVP is very fast, he's good on the feet, so I think you should really make it ugly. And plus, Ian Garry is a big dude, but so is Michael Venom Page. Michael Venom Page is tall, but I think if we're talking about who's a little bit more muscular, I do think it's Ian Garry. And use calf kicks, because of course MVP has such a wide stance, you're able to kick his leg right easily. So try to do that, enter the clinch with him and make it dirty, and even try to shoot for takedowns, mix it up, and let us see some of your other game. And for MVPs, obviously you have to keep this at distance, starting in and out, right, using feints, using weird awkward attacks, so Ian Garry is not used to what is coming back at him. And like I said, Ian does not have much experience, so I do think that MVP has a big advantage, and because of that, I am actually going to go with MVP, guys. I think MVP is going to get this done. MVP has fought a lot of good people. He looked very good against Kevin Holland. And look, I think this will be a close fight. I think it'll be a 29-28 decision for MVP, but I think this will be Ian Garry's first loss, and I'm interested to see how Ian Garry bounces back, but I just think it's such a weird style, and Ian Garry, I don't think has so many weapons in his arsenal to try to, you know, switch up a fight with MVP, trying to make it so much grappling, right? I think MVP will do fine on the feet, and I think he'll win. But the fight between Brian Ortega and Diego Lopes is not as close of a fight, in my opinion. Now, with Brian Ortega's coming off of that performance against Yair Rodriguez, where he rolled his ankle seemingly, you know, in the octagon right before the fight, and managed to win against Yair Rodriguez, coming back after getting beaten badly in the first round. While Diego Lopes has had phenomenal performance after phenomenal performance. I mean, first of all, he started in his debut against Movsar Evloev, almost beating Movsar multiple times, almost submitting him, and since then finishing guys like Sadiq Youssef and Pat Sabatini. Lopes has been looking good. We know he has good jiu-jitsu, we know he has knockout power. What does Ortega need to do to avoid this? Well, I think he definitely needs to lean more on the grappling, right? I think if this is a striking matchup, I don't know if it necessarily favors Brian Ortega so well. Even though Brian Ortega doesn't have the worst striking, I just don't think it really favors him. I think it's better on the ground, so I think he's got to try to really mix in those takedowns, right, and trying to take him down. Similar to what I was saying to Ian Garry, Diego Lopes is another guy that doesn't have as much experience. He isn't undefeated, but he doesn't have as much experience, right? He's been in the UFC for about a little over a year or so by now, and he's already fighting Brian Ortega. Like, that is a massive jump. So Brian Ortega is going to have a massive experience jump over Diego Lopes, but I think he's got to really be patient and wrestle him, you know, control him early, and try to find a sub somewhere, because Brian Ortega, of course, has some of the best jiu-jitsu in the game. I do think he can find a submission on a guy like Diego Lopes, despite Diego being really good at jiu-jitsu himself, but I think he's got to look for a clinch and push him against the fence and look for takedowns from there. And look, Diego Lopes, he also has good jiu-jitsu. I think he'll be able to defend decently against Brian Ortega. I don't think he's going to be just a sitting duck waiting to get submitted out there, guys. I think he will definitely have some sort of defense, and I think it'll at least delay the finish. It gives Lopes more of a chance and more time to help finish Brian Ortega. But I think if I'm Lopes, you keep it on the feet, right? You try to knock out Brian Ortega, especially this is on short notice. I'm sure both guys aren't exactly in the best shape. Look, with all that being said, I like Brian Ortega, but I think I'm gonna have to go with Diego Lopes on this one. I think if this thing stays on the feet, I think Diego Lopes could finish Brian Ortega. Brian Ortega has taken so much damage from Volkanovski to even Yair Rodriguez in his last fight, but even Max Holloway. Brian Ortega has taken a lot of damage, and Diego Lopes just looks like he has crazy power. I mean, he knocked out Sadiq Youssef in the clinch, so you could just see the power that Diego Lopes has. I think he'll be able to land one on Brian Ortega and help finish him. him. He has the ground game that he's not going to be afraid to go for some ground and pound. So I'm going to predict the first or second round knockout for Diego Lopes against Brian Ortega. But let's go to the main event, guys. We've talked long enough about everything else. Jiri Prochazka is going to face Alex Pereira in a big rematch. Last time they faced off was in November at MSG, right? It was their first fight where Jiri Prochazka was coming back. It turned out he was injured going into that fight. Apparently, this is what he's saying. So, of course, I guess take it with a grain of salt, but this is what Jiri is saying. He was injured going into that fight, and regardless, I don't think it really mattered. It didn't really look like he was injured. It wasn't a situation where Pereira easily dominated him. This was a very close fight, right? And I would even say maybe Jiri had an edge in that first fight, because we saw in the first round, Jiri goes for a takedown against Alex Pereira, right? And controls him pretty easily in the first round. I think Alex Pereira did manage to get up. Then in the second round, we see Jiri, you know, throwing feints at Alex Pereira, really confusing him, mixing in the grappling and the feints and everything. And Alex Pereira was so confused, backing up and getting hit up against the fence. And that is what Jiri needs to recreate, because Jiri can absolutely knock out Alex Pereira. We've seen Alex Pereira knocked out before. He needs to really get into that aggressive state, because Alex Pereira's defense mostly is going backwards, right? We don't really see him have, you know, this head movement where he's able to stay on the fence and be fine. He usually moves backwards, and that's how Jiri was able to catch him multiple times in the first fight. So that's what we got to recreate here if I'm Jiri. While Pereira will need to stay in the middle, right? Pereira needs to have that open space, go backwards, to play around with Jiri Prochazka and to move around and set up shots. I think Pereira had a lot of trouble trying to set up shots against Jiri, because Jiri kept switching stances and doing awkward things, which I get, of course, is going to be hard. But what's going to help Jiri not switch stances is if Alex Pereira is kicking the leg of Jiri, because Jiri is going to start trying to hide that leg and stick to one stance. So Pereira really needs to brutalize that leg, which he did in the first fight. If you guys recall, that was one of the best things Alex did, was really hurt the leg of Jiri Prochazka. And he needs to keep Jiri at range somehow. I don't know if he's going to implement some teeps, implement just a good jab, but he needs to keep him at range and set up some shots and land a big blow like he did in the last fight. And look, the last fight, I don't want to go as far to say it was a fluke, because at the end of the day, we all know that Yuri's big weakness is the fact that he leaves his chin up in the air. So it's not a case of getting lucky. It's a case of, look, this is a big flaw in Yuri's game, and he has a big opening to be caught, even if he's winning the fight. In my opinion, I would go as far to say that he was winning the last fight and got caught, and yeah, arguably was an early stoppage. But regardless, I thought Jiri was doing very well on the feet, mixing in the grappling, but then he got caught by that big left hook and a right hand right after, and he got finished. He was definitely hurt, and that could easily happen. It could happen in the first round, second round, third round, could happen any point in this fight. But I think Jiri should definitely try to go for some grappling early, especially Pereira seems to be the one that's a little more out of shape in this fight. Try to go for the grappling early, really fatigue Pereira for the later rounds, and perhaps you can get a finish in round 3 or 4. But with that being said, my prediction is still going to be Alex Pereira, guys. Look, at the end of the day, I don't know, I was almost tempted to go with Jiri, because I do think that Jiri did very well in the last fight, but then just got caught. However, Jiri, this is just a big thing in his game. Even in the fight against Alexander Rakic, he was getting caught. He almost got finished in that fight. I don't think as a whole he's completely sewed up, and let's be honest, he didn't have a full training camp for this, so it's not like he's been preparing for this, studying the last fight all of the time. I think it'll go similar, where Jiri is going to have a lot of success. I think he's going to win the first round. I think he's going to win the second round, but I think we're going to see Alex Pereira get a little bit more success in that second round, and then in the third round, we're going to see Jiri's calf getting beat up, you know, Alex getting a little bit of a rhythm, and I think he's going to find a shot and knock out Jiri Prochazka. But I could easily honestly switch my mind when we get to the fight. I honestly don't know. I keep going back and forth. But guys, let me know what you guys think in the comment section below, and if you guys are confused about the Ryan Garcia situation, I have a video on the screen breaking down the suspension, breaking down all the punishment he has to do now. That's a crazy story. Go check it out. Also check out my video where I talked about Jamal Hill being an absolute crybaby about his Alex Pereira loss. Go check that out as well. Thank you guys for watching. You guys are the best fan base in MMA, and I'll see you guys in the next one.